Hi guys, welcome back to my latest video. In today's review, I'm going to be continuing my X-Men series, which I started a few days ago, leading up to the New Mutants. So next up in this X-Men franchise, we have X2 X-Men United. When anti-mutant Colonel William Stryker kidnaps Professor X and attacks his school, the X-Men must ally with their arch-enemy Magneto to stop him. So that already makes for an interesting sequel to the first movie, but let's see how it plays out. This movie is obviously made in the early 2000s, just like the original X-Men. So once again, just for an early 2000s superhero movie, this changed the genre and has made it what it is today. Now back then there were still those really campy superhero movies or comic book movies. There's like Daredevil, Elektra, Catwoman, all around that time. So it is doing such a remarkable thing around the time. It had to go so different from what the mainstream was like. But where the first movie was great, this one improves on that and creates a really good sequel. One of the best comic book movie sequels of all time in my opinion. It has obviously set the groundwork in the first movie, setting up what mutants are, which it did very well. And so in this movie, they didn't have to explain too much. They just kind of got one left off and created a great movie. This movie is just once again full of great mutant action. I mentioned this in the original X-Men review. They could have just done hand-to-hand combat to make it look more realistic than rather using CGI for the mutant powers, but no. They used even more mutant powers in this one and it looks very, very good, I must admit. Watching this about over 15 years after it was released, it still holds up very, very well. And of course the mutant action scenes I'm talking about is first of all when Stryker's men attack the mansion. You get to see some cool action from the kids there, which I liked seeing. Was you get to see more mutants portray their powers without having to have a big part in the movie. There's also Wolverine's fight with Lady Deathstrike, and not to mention a really great opening in Nightcrawler's entrance in the White House. Logan's past was a mystery, something that was touched on slightly in the first movie, but they give you a lot bigger insight into that in this movie without going into too much detail. Obviously, a few years later, they do go into full detail with X-Men Origins, but we'll talk about that another time. But I just like the humor in this movie. There's all these, you can have your usual like back and forth humor with any movie, but they use the mutants' powers to their advantage to create their own kind of humor. For example, when Logan's having a drink and it's quite room temperature, I guess, he gets Iceman or Bobby to blow on it so it gets colder. Just stuff like that. I think it's very clever. They use it to their advantage. But with that, they still have some powerful things with the mutant discrimination. Obviously, we saw the protests in the first movie, all the political drama with mutants living in society. They don't really show that as much in this movie, but they show how mutants are discriminated against by your average citizen, whether they know that person or not. So it is just very powerful to see like the majority of people dislike mutants. Now I know it's really important to the story, but I didn't enjoy seeing Professor X kind of sidelined as much. You know, he's kind of taken out of the equation very early on. I guess it's a good way to show how they don't need their leader or such to save the world or anything, but I would like to see Professor X more in this movie instead of just tied down. That's a minor problem, but a bigger problem I have with this movie is it's the second movie into this franchise and we still don't really know much about certain characters. Obviously with Jean, we know she has some strong powers which she's yet to have control over completely, but besides that, as a person, there is kind of a love triangle, but there isn't much that had been grown from her character. We don't really know too much about her as a person outside of her powers. And it's not just her, the same goes for Scott, Summers, Cyclops, or even Storm. Besides their powers, we just see Scott have kind of disliked Logan, and that's all we really know about him. And as for Storm, we don't really know anything about them. And as Storm and Cyclops aren't really involved in this movie as much, there is no room for them to grow without feeling very forced. So I'm just a bit disappointed that we don't really know them that well. We're going into the third movie in this franchise. X2 uses having the first film establish everything to its advantage, and it allows it to grow on top of that instead of separately. Not only is X2 a worthy successor, but it's also a better movie in my opinion. Although we get some great mutant action, I'm still slightly disappointed about some of the character growth, but nonetheless, still a great movie. But just like X-Men, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. And once again, really worth watching, especially if you enjoyed the first movie. So my second movie down in my X-Men review series. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of X2 and just in general how I can improve my videos as I'm looking to hit 100 subscribers as soon as possible. Once again, thank you for watching and I hope to see you in my next video.